in help UK trained GPs and consultants find jobs overseas. We were founded in 2008. So we've helped over 2,000 doctors find positions overseas. We've got over 100 who are currently going through the process. And at the moment, we've got over 600 GPs that we have placed into Australia. We cover other locations as well. We also cover Middle East, Canada, New Zealand, but tonight we'll be talking about the new pathway into Australia. We work closely with the clients that we recruit to. So we build up relationships with the employers. I have been out to Australia myself 4 times and visited lots of the practices and lots of the different states and areas where the doctors are going to work. We appreciate that you're not just changing job, you're also moving to another country. And in lots of instances, it's not just you, you're also taking partners, families, and beloved pets with you. So it is important that it's the right move for you. So it's not about us just finding you a job, it's also about us finding you the right job. We're UK based, so we're available on the same time zone as you to speak. Although you're going to Australia, you will want to speak to us in the Reg team on the same time zone. Crystal and myself recruit into Australia. I have been with the company that's around 10 years. Crystal's been with us around 8 years. So she originally worked in the registration team before moving to work with me, recruiting to Australia. I haven't been hogging all the visits. Things like COVID and Crystal having a family mean that she hasn't got to go out yet. However, she is from New Zealand, so she is familiar with that side of the world. She referred earlier to New Zealand as Australia's little cousin, and that it's quite a similar lifestyle and culture. So yeah, she's also very well experienced to help you guys for a move to Australia. And we've also got our in-house registration team who are really invaluable. The feedback that we get from doctors from them is, regularly we hear we couldn't have done it without them. So we're here to answer your questions tonight. I'll pass you over to Crystal and then we'll hear from Ria as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi everyone. For those who I've not already spoken to who've joined the chat, my name's Crystal, and I work alongside Vicky recruiting GPs out to Australia. I thought we would start this off just with like a little bit of background about these changes and kind of why they have changed, to kind of give a bit of background understanding to it all. So early last year, they kind of created what was called a Crook report that was aimed at improving the system for specialist international medical graduates looking to relocate to Australia. So it's not just GPs that are going through this process of change, it is also nurses and other consultant specialists and things like that. It basically came about because of duplications and delays with the current system. So when they were reviewing this, they spoke to, agencies like, ourselves. We were able to give a bit of feedback through feedback sessions about problems that we knew about with the process, small practices, larger corporates, and doctors who had gone through the process themselves to kind of get an idea of what was working and what wasn't. They did a lot of comparison to other countries like Canada, Middle East, and New Zealand to look at their registration processes. And all regulatory bodies, including the AMC, RACGP, and Immigration, were consulted, and all of their processes were looked at. So it wasn't an AHPRA-specific review. It was a review of the whole process in and of itself. So basically, they made some recommendations based on their findings, and an interim report was published in April 2023. AMC, RACGP, Immigration, they all had a chance to review the interim report, kind of make suggestions on ways they could meet those improvement requirements, or feedback that they thought maybe didn't match the recommendations. And then a final Crook report was published on December 2023. AHPRA, really fortunately, were really on board with these changes and really supportive of that, and so they announced their plans for the fast track application, which went to the government and was approved by the Ministers of Health, and as we all know, very excitingly, was launched the 21st of October. Perfect. So most important question, who was eligible. And this is kind of, they reviewed all of their processes and who they historically had given substantially comparable outcomes to, and they listed 3. So doctors who are from Ireland who hold their MICGP and CSCST, doctors from the UK who hold their MRCGP since 2007 with either the CCT or PMIT-B, and doctors who hold fellowship from the Royal College of General Practitioners in New Zealand. So we thought it would be quite useful because we've had quite a lot of questions about the current pathway via PEP and the AHPRA Fast Track pathway. And so we've put together this little visual just to kind of demonstrate how it's going to work going forward and how they compare to each other. So you'll see on the left with the RACGP PEP pathway, that is broken down into 5 steps. So you kind of have, well, it's technically 6, but step 1, source verification of your qualifications, and that remains the same for both pathways. Step 2 on the PEP pathway is a comparability assessment with the RACGP PEP Specialist Program. And that's where they would look at your training qualifications and experience and match that or compare that to an Australian trained GP. Once that was complete, they would then do Part B, which is your job approval, and they'd have to approve the position that you were going to. And then you would move forward to your AHPRA application via provisional or limited registration. And that would depend on kind of where you did your primary medical degree and your internship. Visa would be step 4, and then step 5 would be kind of your Medicare provider number application. So that whole process is what it would look like for your PEP. And the AHPRA Fast Track pathway just kind of cuts out that middle bit with the RACGP, where you go from source verification straight to your AHPRA application. And the big difference is for those who are eligible for the Fast Track, you won't be starting on provisional or limited registration. You'll be starting on specialist registration, and that's a real key point and a really important part to kind of understand kind of going forward and kind of how we like answer questions about what that means for you once you're out in Australia as well. So that's just a wee flow chart of how it all works. It's basically not all about just the registration process. There are going to be significant differences between those pathways for when you get out to Australia. So via the RACGP PEP pathway, again, we've put together a wee visual of kind of the flow chart of what you need to do. So under the PEP process, like I said, with AHPRA, you would start on provisional or limited registration, and you would work through these steps to be able to obtain your fellowship, which would be then a stepping stone to step up to specialist registration. And that includes working for 6 months full-time equivalent. So the RACGP define full-time as 38 hours. So that 6 months, if you're working 32 hours a week, actually is extended beyond 6 months because you need to work the 6 months full-time equivalent. You work under level 3 supervision for 6 months. You'd complete 6 small learning sessions that are an hour and a half each. Complete a workplace-based assessment where an RACGP assessor would come in and assess you in your workplace. They've also introduced in July this year that they were asking doctors on the PEP pathway, for anyone starting after the 1st of December this year, to complete an EASL multi-choice test, which is basically the AMC MCQ multi-choice questionnaire. And then once you've completed all these steps, you would be awarded fellowship from the college, which would then allow you to apply for specialist registration with AHPRA. And like I said, as a bit of a stepping stone, what you ideally want is specialist registration, and we can kind of go into that in a wee bit more detail further on. The other kind of key point is with the workplace-based assessments, this is made up of 6 workplace-based assessments and 6 supplementary assessments where you provide like multi-source feedback forms from colleagues and patients, etc. Now, for the AHPRA Fast Track Pathway, like I mentioned, you start on specialist registration, so you don't have to work your way through the different registration types. So like I said, it's limited or provisional, and then it can go up to general, with the penultimate being the specialist registration that you hold. So you would start on that specialist registration to kind of safeguard the process and to give everyone equal footing and making sure that they are still well supported. You do still have to work under supervision for 6 months, and that will remain in place because countries like Canada and New Zealand have similar supervision requirements, and it's a really positive thing. The supervision, again, it can be what's called indirect to or remote, where your supervisor is available either in practice or remotely via telephone or video link. You are solely responsible for your own patients. They want confirmation that you've completed an orientation of the practice, because again, this is quite specific per practice and the things that you need to know about that particular practice. Complete a cultural safety education learning course. Again, really important because in Australia, the Aboriginal population have quite unique health concerns and things like that, or there's spiders and snakes and all that kind of stuff. A lot of medicine that you'll experience in Australia that is different from the UK. So they want everybody to have that kind of equal footing for that, kind of going forward and being prepared. Complete at least 2 other assessments. So the other assessments can be multi-source feedback, a mini CEX, a DOPX, and a CBD. And we can kind of give you more information about those kind of after this, kind of send you a link to AHPRA's website where they kind of give you a guide to what you need to do, and you can obviously choose the 2 that you do. Once you've completed all of these, you have the conditions removed from your registration with AHPRA. So that can all seem quite quite a bit of a jumble in your head when you're not used to these kind of things like specialist or provisional limit registration. But we've kind of listed some pros and cons about the 2 different pathways to hopefully help kind of make help the decision-making process when it comes to deciding between the pathways. So some pros. Biggest one is the processing time, and this was probably the biggest complaint in the Crook report as well, is that through the PEP process, those 5 steps take about 10 to 12 months to get through the whole registration process from start to finish. Those 5 steps, about 10 to 12 months. This AHPRA new registration process in its totality should take about 4 to 6 months. AHPRA have also announced that they're hoping to process their AHPRA applications in a quicker time frame as well. So via the PEP pathway, those provisional limited registration pathway applications take about 8 to 10 weeks, take between 6 to 8 weeks to process, and they're aiming to kind of process the new ones in 4 to 6 weeks. So it means that you can get out to Australia and start working a lot quicker, which is really exciting for us because, working towards it for the better part of a year can be quite tiring. Another huge positive is the cost. So the application cost for the new AHPRA application is just over 2,500 Australian dollars, versus the PEP program, which is just under 12,000 Australian dollars. So a huge jump down in cost, and a huge win for everybody in that sense. Again, a big pro is that you'll start on specialist registration. And why that is really important is because under specialist registration, you are considered to be vocationally registered. So it is something that patients and clients look for, is that you have the ability to be vocationally registered. And the reason why they look for that is because through Medicare, there's different rates that you can bill your patients, and there are non-VR rates that are lower, and there's that higher VR rates. So under the specialist registration, you get access to the higher VR8s immediately, where through the PEP program, that needs to be approved by the RACGP. And again, this kind of speaks to the timelines. So for your Medicare application, via the AHPRA Fast Track application process, that application will take 4 weeks through the RACGP to sign off to say that they approve you to be on an approved 3GA program and grant you access to the higher VR rates and have that provider number approved takes 12 weeks. So, and you can't, the reality is you can't start work until you have your provider number. So 4 weeks versus 12 weeks is quite considerable for that part of the process. Another huge positive that's going to come out of this is if you do have an interest in urgent care, and we do have clients that have urgent care centres attached to their general practice, it means that you can start working in these urgent care centres from day one. Through the RACGP PEP process, they have to approve your position, which includes kind of giving them details of the days of the week, the hours, and the type of work that you're going to be doing. And they require you to work in a standardized general practice until you get your fellowship. So if you have got a special interest in urgent care, it just gives you a little bit of flexibility to be able to do that work from day one in Australia, as opposed to having to wait 6 to 12 months until you have your fellowship to be able to do that. Obviously, nothing is perfect, so things do come with some cons. Fellowship is a big one for a lot of the doctors that we've spoken to already. And at the moment there, if you go via the AHPRA Fast Track application process, there isn't a clear pathway to fellowship. But that is at the moment. We have had communication from the RACGP to say they are considering a potential pathway to fellowship and what that could look like for doctors who go through the expedited pathway. But I think it's also really important to note that the fellowship that you would obtain through going through a comparability assessment is basically a stepping stone to allow you to get to specialist registration, which is really what you want to have. All of these pathways are designed to give you a pathway to specialist registration. And without kind of being critical of it, or kind of sounding negative or taking anything away from it, the fellowship that you would obtain from the RACGP when it comes to kind of your future career or going somewhere else, it doesn't hold the same amount of weight as your MRCGP, because for any other country who you put an application forward to, it's always going to revert back to where you did your formal training. So it's just really, like I said, a stepping stone for specialist registration, with the ultimate being that's what you want to hold. At the moment, for anyone who is interested in teaching or supervising in the future, they do normally look for someone to hold fellowship. So if you wanted to go on the fast track, you would probably want to look at a fellowship pathway if you were really interested in teaching or supervising. But another really key point to note is you can only supervise another doctor once you've held fellowship for 3 years. So again, if you went through the PEP pathway, you're probably looking at about 4 years working in Australia before you'd be able to do any teaching or supervising, because it can take up to a year to get your fellowship, and then you need to have it for 3 years before you can kind of supervise. So they're kind of the big pros and cons that we've kind of come across. Also, these are the pros and cons that we've talked to clients about. So it's not just us making these up, it's a lot of what everybody else is saying as well. So again, we get a lot of questions about this new pathway. A lot of rumours have been circulating about what things will mean, what you can and can't do. And basically, here's a bit of a summary about what we have had confirmed. So how will the 19AA and 19AB requirements be met under the new pathway? And for some of you, that might mean nothing, but basically that relates to your Medicare application. So the requirements of the 19AB is that an international doctor must work in a district of priority location, and this remains completely the same. So AHPRA have no control or influence over Medicare and the Department of Health setting those regulations. The big one really was the 19AA requirements, and it did state that for you to satisfy the 19AA, you either had to have permanent resident, for anyone that had permanent residence or wanted permanent residence, they had to hold fellowship or be on an approved 3GA program. So that kind of it set alarm bells off for us to begin with, because we were like, we have a lot of doctors who are interested in PR, and if they want to get that, what does that mean for them going forward, and being able to satisfy those requirements. We have had confirmation from 19AA directly in black and white to say that they are in the process of changing that term to take away the requirement of fellowship and replace that with specialist registration. So that's really positive. We have heard rumours that your earnings will be affected negatively, or certainly that it's a positive to be able to have fellowship to access those higher VR rates through Medicare. And like I kind of touched on earlier, you get access to those VR rates through two different ways. One, being on an approved 3GA program with a college approval, which is the current PEP pathway, and the other is with specialist registration. So holding specialist registration will immediately give you access to the higher VR rates through Medicare. I will only briefly touch on this because we have a migration agent, Ria, on the call, and she can kind of discuss this in a lot more detail. But can you apply for PR straight away? Answer, unfortunately, is no. The current policy that we're aware of on immigration is that you must be able to demonstrate that you're working without restrictions, and that is for like the 189 points-based visa. So via the PEP pathway and the expedited pathway, you are required to work under supervision for 6 months. So these are conditions on your registration. So the 189 would kind of become available once you had exhausted those conditions and had them removed from your AHPRA registration. So not straight away. So another really positive that's kind of come out, and a lot of questions we get this about, is the recency of practice requirements for the RECGP. And for any doctors who are on this call who have looked at the PEP pathway or maybe started the PEP pathway, you will know that the RECGP have a very particular way of assessing your recency of practice, and they have got a very strict set of requirements that need to be met. AHPRA have recency of requirement questions in their application process, but they are a lot more flexible, and they basically consider any clinical work that you've been doing as a GP for 4 weeks in the last 12 months and 12 months in the last 3 years, will count towards your recency. You don't have to provide additional evidence or letters from your practices, so that's a real positive. But they look at it as clinical work as a GP rather than it being in a very specific setting like the RACGP currently do. For those doctors who have MRCGP by exam from 2007 but have PMIT-B instead of the CCT, because there's a bit of an overlap there, are you eligible? And the key answer, or the key qualification that they make your eligibility assessment on, is the MRCGP by exam. So anyone who holds MRCGP post 2007 is eligible for this application process. So that's kind of the end of my spiel, and I know that's probably a lot, but we will have some question and answer at the end. But I will pass this over to Ria, who will talk to you through some of the visa pathways, because within the Crook report, there were recommendations made to immigration about changing the visa process, and we are waiting for those changes to be implemented. So I will pass this over to Ria to talk to you about this now.
Hi everyone. Good evening. So my name is Ria. I'm a qualified migration agent or immigration specialist for Australia since I've been qualified since 2011. So I've got about more than 10 years of experience behind me. So I my company Visa Consorts, it was established, just to give you a brief background, it was established in 2016, and I'm proud to say each year we're growing. More and more Brits are making the move, so which is good my end. Okay, so topics that I will cover would be the employer sponsorship visas, the GSM visa pathway that you guys would likely be interested in the three-step process under the GSM visa pathway, which would be the skills assessment, EOI, and visa application. And then lastly, I'll be giving a snapshot of what the changes that's soon to be coming, actually as early as next week. And then yeah, so firstly, there are two, as you would know, there are two employer-sponsored visas. These are 186 and 482 visas. The 186, which is the next slide, please. Yeah, there. Okay, so the 186. So this is what everyone seems to very popular. It seems to be one thing, because obviously it's a permanent visa. So this allows you to stay in Australia indefinitely. You'll be able to work and study in Australia. You'll have access to Medicare. You'll have multiple entry for 5 years in and out of Australia, and you'll be able to apply for citizenship once you're eligible. Now, with a 482 visa, since it's a temporary visa, so you're only able to work in Australia for up to 4 years. You can study, there's also multiple entry, and you can apply for PR once you're eligible. So next, yeah, and then so eligibility criteria. So for 186, you have to have an eligible occupation. So for everyone in this online, that would be doctor. You have to have a relevant work experience of at least 3 years. You must be registered through AHPRA. You have to have a positive skills assessment, which is the registration. You need to be, just to emphasize on this one, which I'll go back to it in the next slide. Um, you need to be nominated by an Australian employer for full-time employment. So you also need to be under 45 years of age. So if you're older than this, then you've unfortunately have missed the boat. Um, you need to meet the health and character requirement, and you have to have a competent level in English, which UK citizens are exempted from. Now, with the 482 temporary skills shortage visa, there is no age limit to it. Again, I'm emphasizing this one once more. So you have to be nominated by an approved sponsor. So you have to work for your nominating sponsor. So if you change employer, then you have to apply for another 482 visa. You must have your qualifications recognized. So again, you have to be registered, have worked in your nominated occupation for at least 2 years. You have to have health insurance, but with UK citizens, obviously you can access there's a reciprocal help because of Commonwealth. We're part of a Commonwealth country. You can access the public health insurance. There's a reciprocal agreement, as you would most likely be familiar with. Meet the health and character requirement, and again, English competent level, which you'll be exempted from. So yeah, so the next slide would be, okay, so what is so now general skilled migration visa pathway. So do you know that you don't need to actually wait years to get PR process underway? So some um most often than not, people who aspiring migrants, they think that the once they have the 482 visa, then the next path would be a 186, but that's not really the case. Um, And most often than not, they wait for the 186 and then it doesn't happen. And by then it's too late to fix it because they've they're over 45. So when you go there on a 482 visa, as long as you meet the GSM visa pathway, you can apply as soon as, or you can get the PR process underway as soon as soon as possible. So what is a GSM visa pathway? So it allows skilled workers to migrate to Australia without a sponsor. So it's a points and invite based, and your visa options would be a 189, 190, and 491. So why GSM and not 186 visa? So given the GPs work as independent contractors, they won't be considered as working full-time employment. So as in reference to what I highlighted earlier, they could get offered for 186, but the nomination application won't be successful given the work setup because of that independent contractor um, setup. So hence, the best option for PR after a 482 visa would be the GSM visa pathway. From a professional perspective, I I always say 482. It's a quick fix to get to Australia. A lot. Eh, yeah, you can get a 186, but it's all dependent on something to happen, which for me um I think it would me handling cases or for my clients, I think it would be better to have the control to take control on how you navigate your PR journey. So I do believe that a GSM visa pathway would give you more a certain pathway to PR versus a 186 um i- yeah pathway. So yeah, so just the next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So GSM visa pathway is a three-step process which starts with skills assessment. So for medical professionals, the government or the immigration department will accept the full or unconditional or general medical registration with the AHPRA as proof of skills assessment. So this is in relation to what Crystal mentioned about can you apply for PR. So once that the conditions have been taken taken have been removed on your registration, then that's when you can use it for as proof of your skills assessment. So just to note, the APRA Fast Track Specialist pathway. So conditions imposed, there are conditions that are imposed on this registration, which include 6 months supervised practice. So once that's all been removed, like I said, mentioned, and then you've done the 6 months, then you can start your GSM visa pathway um underway. So you can start that, and that makes it even faster for everyone. Yeah. So next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So the next step, so once you've done the skills assessment, once your registration is all clear, um i- the next would be the expression of interest. So the you would be required to get an in invite once you this is actually, sorry, a requirement for you to get an invite. You basically you create a profile through skills select, and it will be active for 2 years. So in those two within that 2 year timeline, hopefully as soon as possible. And with doctors, I don't see it. I don't see. Um, I would be surprised if they'll be waiting 2 years until they get invited. So what's important to note here in this stage is you need to provide accurate information. So you need to claim the correct points because overclaiming could lead to a refusal. um, you need to be strategic as well. You need to learn the state criteria, the ins and outs of how or maybe you need to be familiar of how to increase your chances for an invite. It does look straightforward, but it's easy to make mistakes. And in this stage as well, if you express interest for a 190 and 491 visas, you also get invited for state nomination. So once you've got an invite for nomination, you have 14 days to respond. So it's very important that when you lodge the EOI, all your documents are ready, because it can happen the following day. You can get invited for a state nomination the next day. So you have to have complete documents. So and then the last step would be the visa application stage. So once invited, you have 60 days to apply for a visa. You need to provide all the documents to support your claim on EOI. You have to provide health and character clearances, preferably ones requested by case officer, because these documents are time sensitive and is only valid for 12 months. So timing is essential here. And then upon submission, so if you're on a 482 visa, when you submit this um, visa application, you'll be granted a bridging visa A, which gets activated once your 482 visa expires. So while you're waiting for the visa grant, you're still going to be on a 482 visa with the same rights. And then the 482 will cancel automatically once you've been granted the um the PR visa. Yeah. So next thing. Yeah, so now with the upcoming changes, there is now this skills in demand visa, which is more a streamlined 482 visa. So this aims to simplify the process for skilled workers to contribute to the Australian economy. So it's a lot clearer pathway, and tailored streams for different applicant profiles. So under this skills in demand visa, there are three. If you just next slide, please. There are three streams, but I'll just focus on the core skills because it's what's applicable for doctors, for all of you. So what's the purpose of this? So it's the core skills. So basically the three streams would be the specialist, core, and essential skills. So the core skills, the purpose is the core pathway for skilled employees, such as doctors. Salary threshold is 73,150, which I could imagine doctors would be earning more than that, definitely. Um, occupations, occupation should be on the CSOL list. Um, we've not because this is just an overview of what we're kind of expecting. So not until it's out there, even us agents still need to be a lot more familiar with it. With this CSOL, we're still also anticipating changes, and we're kind of nervous about the changes. But definitely, what we know is because they've released a list of 100% that it's going to be in the list. Obviously, doctors would still be on the list, so there's nothing to worry on that part. Labor market testing, yes, it needs to be. Uh, it what is a labor market testing? It's more of um, a sponsor must prove that they've advertised locally and they couldn't find anyone within Australia. So that's why they need to sponsor someone from overseas. Yeah, so and next page. And so applicable to all streams. So with this new skills in demand visa, experience would be reduced from 2 years to 1 year, and the visa validity up to 4 years. So it's kind of still the same as 482. Yeah. Okay. So to summarize, um, basically, to successfully immigrate to Australia as a doctor would need thorough comprehension of the registration process, which now has been addressed with a new fast track pathway. And if you're going through head medical, obviously they can, as Vicky mentioned, the registration team can definitely support you on this registration process. In addition, you also need an in-depth understanding of the visa application process. Um, it's very helpful if you understand the complexities of of immigration law. And once you're clear with your pathway to PR, a qualified, experienced agent can skillfully navigate you through the complexities of the application process. So just making sure that the agent you're dealing with is registered with a MARA office. So yeah, so basically we're here to help. Visa Consort, myself, we're here to help. And if you have any questions, by all means, you can email me on the email address, ria@visaconsort.com. Yeah. So if you have any questions, I don't know, Vicky, maybe just altogether questions.
Yeah, hello. So yeah, we'll have some sort of questions and answers. So yeah, if anybody has got questions, then go for it.
You can either type them in the chat thing or raise your hand and unmute yourself. I did see an email, a question, sorry. Do you need a recent English language test, IELTS or OET for the GSM pathway? I know that you do for the points-based visa to evidence your English language and to get higher points for your English language. It's kind of based on higher level of points for your IELTS and things like that, but I don't know if it's the same for all of the other pathways.
For the GSM, so
Yeah.
all GSM, if you're from an English speaking country, because you don't really need to do English, but if you want to gain points, I find it somehow silly because they for my British clients, because there's no other language they can speak and they have to do this, but they have to do what they have to do. So to give you 10 or 20 points, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, that's kind of what we would say as well. It's definitely worth adding those points. So I'm just going through them here. What are the health and character requirements for the visas, and what does this entail? So all doctors going through a visa process need to do a full medical, including bloods and a chest X-ray. So they're looking for HIV, Hep B, Hep C, and TB, kind of the big transferable ones because you're in close contact with patients. And they have questions around where you've lived. So any country that you have been in for 12 months or more, like it doesn't need to be consecutively, anywhere that you've spent 12 months or more in the last 10 years since 2016, you would need a police certificate for that. We, again, for the 482 visa, we kind of provide specific information about all of that. There is another question about the GSM. Is it the same as the points-based pathway?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. From Zoe, my understanding is that after you've done a 6-month supervision period, you can start applying for PR. Is this correct? I've been told 2 years. Is it different if you're over 45? So like Ria kind of touched on, or we both kind of touched on, for like the 189 points-based visa, you need to have unconditional registrations. That's that 6-month supervision, and that's for that kind of points-based visa. The 2-year visa that some clients are happy to sponsor for is the 186 transition visa, where you have worked for an employer for 2 years and then you can transition through that. The points-based visa is for people who are under 45. in the Cook report, they did talk about raising the age to 50, but as far as I know, there's not been any kind of confirmation from immigration.
We've not heard of anything.
No, but there were good arguments as to why they wanted to raise it, and immigration did respond in a receptive way to that suggestion. It's just nothing's kind of come out from that at this stage. Mohammed, I am a newly qualified.
Just to add, Crystal, it used to be 50, and then they brought it down. They brought it up to 45. So I don't know if they're even going to change 50, because I think back then it was, since 2017, it's become really very difficult to get visas now. So
sorry, that was my question then. I'm not clear about the answer then. So if you're over 45, my understanding, Ria, was you were saying that once you've done your 6-month supervision, you can start applying for PR if you're on the 482, which if you were over 45, you would be on a 482 visa, right?
If you're over 45, GSM would not be your option anymore, because you're over the age limit. So your only chance of staying would be a 482 visa. Or if there is this regional sponsorship, that's also an option. But that rarely happens. So
I thought there was age exemptions for GPs on the 186 if they earned over a certain amount.
That's a 186, but not the GSM visa.
So there are some exemptions if they're over 45 on the 186.
And that's the one that would be applicable after you've worked for 2 years.
Yeah.
For a 186, yes. Mm-hmm.
So Ria, if you're over 45, are you saying that it's not possible to get PR?
No, that's no.
For a GSM visa, for just a GSM, that's not an option anymore.
So your best option, everyone's got to go out on the 482 visa to begin with. And so there is the 186 transition stream visas that practices that we work with are happy to support doctors through after you've worked for a period of 2 years. And that's what immigration has set out, as that transition becomes available. And there are age exemptions for GPs going through that transition for the 186, but that's not the GSM visa. So like the points-based one is got that age limitation. And for the points-based visa, that would be available after you've done that 6 months supervision. So the road to PR would be a little bit longer.
Yeah. And I think also to add, so if you're in a 482 and then hoping to do a 186 eventually, just also be mindful that, immigration policies, they are so ever changing. So you may be waiting 2 years, and then by the time you think you're qualified, the rules have changed, and then you'll be panicking. So I always say, once you're there on a 482, have a backup plan, and the GSM would be the best option, because you can navigate.
But not if you're over 45.
No. So because you can navigate your PR pathway independently.
Okay.
Other question?
Sorry, I got a question. First of all, thank you to everyone. It was very useful information. My question is about PEP and fast track pathway. I was under the impression that this is just for the process getting membership or registration with Royal College of Australia. So one path is PEP, where duration is longer, and the process is little bit longer, and then you get registration. And this fast track one is the duration is less, a bit less time consuming or requirements. My question is the outcome, because when you are explaining the pros and cons, the specialist registration, what's the difference between specialist registration with Royal College of Australia and the registration like with both pathway? The outcome,
The same
There's
registration.
there's really nothing. So basically, you want to have specialist registration. So how it kind of works is your entry level registration with AHPRA going through the PEP pathway is limited or provisional, and that's based on where you did your primary medical degree and your internship, and that's a very specific pathway for whether you have provisional or limited. The next step up would be general registration, but through the PEP pathway, you bypass general to get to specialist registration. And it's just AHPRA specialist registration. And basically you, under the PEP pathway, you would use that fellowship pathway as a stepping stone to get to specialist registration. AHPRA are going to give you that specialist registration straight away. So your registration type, what that means for you, how you can work, that doesn't differ at all. And again, what is really, really important to note is when I first started working for Head Medical in 2016, doctors, like UK trained GPs, would go through the SPP pathway with RACGP, and that involved uploading your qualifications, CV, certificate of good standing, passport, letter of good standing, and you got fellowship straight away. But you also got specialist registration straight away. So the whole process of giving UK doctors specialist registration straight away is not a new concept, and there is no difference between going through PEP to obtain specialist registration or going through AHPRA fast track to obtain it. At the end of the day, once you have specialist registration, it's all the same, but you want to have specialist registration, and that's what everybody's aiming to get to. It's just different pathways to get to it. So this is very, very specific for UK doctors, but there are other pathways for doctors who hold partially comparable qualifications, and the pathway, they still are trying to get to specialist registration because that's the thing that you want to have the most.
Okay, thank you. So one thing is clear, that either pathway, you get the same registration, same status with Royal College. But what
with the Royal
happens,
College with AHPRA.
right? Yeah. So first AHPRA registration, and then you go for fellowship with the Royal College of Australia.
So via the fast track application, you don't need fellowship with the Royal College of Australia. Under the PEP pathway, you have to get the fellowship before you can apply for specialist registration. A lot of people kind of view fellowship as kind of the thing that you want most. But the reality in terms of the registration pathway and how all the applications tie into each other and what that specialist registration means for your earning potential and things, your registration status with AHPRA trumps having fellowship with the RACGP. So what you really want is that specialist registration. You don't need to have the fellowship to have that under this fast track application process. What the RACGP have said is they are aware that some doctors want to have fellowship from the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners to their name, and so you can go through PEP. Or what you can do is you can kind of, once you get out to Australia via the fast track, you can have a look at the different pathways that would be available to you once you're out in Australia to get fellowship if you wished to get it. But all of the clients that we've spoken to are fast track application.
Sorry, is that mean by following the fast track process, you can get the application, you can get the registration, you can start working. What would be your title?
General practitioner.
You would be a vocationally registered general practitioner.
You just wouldn't be able to use the letters FRACGP after your name post-nominally. You would use MRCGP.
So another thing is when you're looking at when you're looking at job adverts within Australia, a lot and kind of with us as well, practices are looking for VR doctors or doctors who are eligible for VR registration, which is vocationally registered registration. So you have what you want to have is that you're vocationally registered. It doesn't matter so much that you have FRA CGP under your like next to your name, because what patients will see on a practice website, or what patients will see when they look on AHPRA's website. So AHPRA is the same as like the GMC, where you can search for a doctor to check kind of their registration history. They will see that you are vocationally registered and that you hold specialist registration with AHPRA.
Okay, so now this is very important. I'm trying to figure out that by going through fast track pathway, you get the registration with AHPRA as a doctor. You got the license to start working, but you're not a member or fellow of Royal College in Australia. And
You can be a member, but you won't hold fellowship straight away.
And your title is vocational registered doctor, or what is
You're a
it?
general
You'll be a
practitioner.
Yeah,
yeah,
general practitioner.
specialist.
Okay.
You're a general practitioner with specialist vocational registration.
Okay, now in UK back here, we don't have any much difference between member of Royal College or fellow of Royal College, because it's all a new title. How does it work in Australia? Like, what's the difference between the member and fellow?
And there isn't any. What it comes down to is if you're vocationally registered or you're non-vocationally registered, and how that affects your billings. So when you look up a doctor in Australia, it will say what your registration type is, and then it will list your qualifications. But so they'll list where you did your training, and so the key is that you hold vocational registration, and that you have specialist registration. You can bill at the VR rates, but holding membership or FRA CGP isn't going to stop you getting patients. It's not going to negatively impact your earning potential. It's not going to stop you from getting a further job down the line.
If you think, like in the UK, you had the JCPT GP. Doctors who have that are not considered any different to doctors who are MRCGP. They're still general practitioners. They still do the same job. They're recognised the same. It was just a different way that they qualified, and it's different letters.
Okay, so with vocational registration, we can still get a membership with the Royal College of Australia?
Yes, but you can't be not a fellow, but yeah, you can be a member.
You could sign up for membership today if you wanted to pay them. So you can still be a member. You can still sign up to them and use them as your CPD home. There are 2 other organisations that you can use as a CPD home, but it's not vital to your career as a general practitioner to hold that fellowship. Like I said, it's kind of that they would award you fellowship based on your comparability rather than your training. So in terms of the value of your qualifications, your MRCGP from the UK is always going to have more weight and meaning behind an FRA CGP. And the pathway to fellowship was always there as a stepping stone to get to specialist registration. And they kind of put those in place so that they didn't have doctors sitting in that middle tier, which is that general registration part. They want everyone to kind of have a pathway to specialist registration, because that's kind of the top end level of registration.
Everyone's starving.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, sorry. Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's the future prospects? Like, for instance, why I'm asking this question second time. In UK currently, we do have, certain like specialist nurse practitioners. They perform their duties as a clinical physicians. So their title is different, but they work along in our clinics. So what I'm trying to work out before this is a big decision for all of us,
Mm-hmm.
that because which pathway to choose.
Yeah,
So we
yeah,
don't want
you're
to.
not going over as a nurse practitioner. You're not going over, you know, it's not that you're not a GP. You're absolutely going over to work as a doctor and a GP. It's not a secondary pathway or, you know, in any way doing a different position. It's exactly the same job.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
just a different pathway to go there. And we know that some doctors will still want to get fellowship when they get there. And we're waiting to see what the route will be. Now, if you go out on the expedited pathway and you think, you know, actually, I want to get my fellowship, I want to have the FRA CGP, you could still complete the PEP requirements and do that. These two pathways are not mutually exclusive.
Okay. Has anyone already completed this vocational registration and started working there?
It's only been introduced on the 21st of October, so not yet. We've
Not
got
yet.
some applications in, so hopefully in the
Yeah.
next, maybe ask us that question in 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically it's like I kind of showed in that part in that kind of pathway through the registration process. It's not just about the AHPRA application. You've got visa and Medicare. So we're probably looking about a 4 to 6 month turnaround between starting the process and being able to start work. We don't say any of this lightly. So we obviously, you know, I have seen, this is the fourth kind of pathway that I've seen for GPs in 8 years. So I say this with a lot of knowledge about how each application works with each other and kind of what it leads on to and why there are pathways and what that all means when you're out in Australia. We've also talked to, you know, all of our clients and they're all really positive about this. So again, you're going in on an even playing field. All of the doctors who have trained in Australia and have only ever worked in Australia hold specialist registration. So the fast track application is allowing you to go in at their level, holding specialist registration, earning the same A1 rebates with Medicare. It's not going to negatively impact you in any way in your ability to work as a GP.
Crystal and I can organise to have another chat with you again after today, just to sort of go, you know, let you sort of mull things over, and then we can go through it again with you in a one-to-one if that would be helpful.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I can see Canal's put his hand up. So if you unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thank you. It's all been really helpful. Thank you, Crystal and everyone else. I just wanted to ask if you've done your IELTS about 8 or 9 years ago, is it still valid for the GMS application? Or
We can use it for AHPRA if you have employment, like for AHPRA, you can use older English language tests with supporting documents, but I think for visa applications, it all needs to be dated within the last 2 years.
Sorry, Crystal, with GSM pathway, they will accept up to 3 years.
3 years.
But normally, so IELTS and PT are the most popular English tests. So normally they're only valid for 2 years, but immigration will accept up to 3 years.
okay, did you say the IELTS test, Ria? Is it the IELTS test that you need to do?
IELTS and PTE are the most popular
And
ones. So, but an
PTE?
OET
Okay.
as well, for medical professionals, they also accept OET.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
And Mohammed, you've asked, being a newly qualified GP, will that have impact on your visa? No, it won't. As you know, you're eligible. The GPs that we work with will all go in the 482 because they are going on a service agreement, which means there isn't a direct application for PR. But the 482, yeah, you're completely eligible for it. And there's another doctor, Dr. Chowan, has asked about being over 45. Zoe and Dr. Chowan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the information about the exemptions for the 186 if you're over 45 and send you that, you know, the actual legislation in black and white so that you can have a look through that. We do have we do have a decent amount of doctors that are over 45 that are in your situation, and so they have gone over and they have gone on the 186 route. And I do know that, yeah, I suppose that there is always a potential risk that could change, but there's a risk that anything could change. The status quo as it is just now is going over aged 45 on the 482, you are eligible for the 186 on with the relevant exemptions.
Vicky, just to add, just to clarify with like Zoe when she asked about options. So the options, so definitely option is not GSM, but ENS and RSMS, so which is 186 and 187.
Okay.
There's another question here. If you're going over on a spouse's visa, when should the IMG pathway be started, before moving or once you're in Australia? And do you have to have a job in place to apply for AHPRA? And can you apply for AHPRA for specialist registration before applying for jobs? So it really kind of depends on your personal situation, and you know, when you're planning to move out to Australia, as to when you want to start the pathway and when you want to commence work. If you are heading out to Australia in the next 4 to 6 months and you want to start work quite quickly, then yes, definitely start the process. Strictly speaking, AHPRA have said that you can apply for the new fast track without having a job in place. However, there are questions within the application that kind of make that seem difficult. So they ask for where you're going to be working, and they ask for supporting documents for your application that we are required to submit to show that you've got support for supervision. So they can make an assessment on your eligibility, but all of that won't really be finalized until you have that job offer and they can like note where you're going to be working. And the Medicare application that you apply for to get your provider number is very much based on the job that you have. So you're not really going to save yourself any time by not applying for the job first. It's probably going to be more straightforward and streamline if you have the job in place and then apply for AHPRA. But we can kind of talk about your timelines and like a separate call and kind of give more specific advice to your particular situation if you want. The DPA thing, the moratorium's 10 years. So you still have to work in a DPA area for 10 years. The good news under the fast track application is that the exemptions for DPA have always been there, but the RACGP wouldn't approve them as a PEP approved placement. So you have there is a little bit more flexibility about accessing some of the DPA exemptions. One that we spoke about with one of our clients is doing 6-month rotations around kind of city centre areas. That could be an option, and that's dependent on kind of your personal situation and what you want to do. And again, we can kind of talk about the pros and cons of that in more detail and the options that would be available. I wouldn't say that that's like we have a ton of opportunities that are like that. It's kind of more kind of
there
case.
There are exemptions available, but it depends very much what is available at that time and where you are. So although they exist, it very much depends on the availability. And if you go out and you're able to access one, that's great. But I would say making the plan to go out with the view of getting exemptions probably not the best route. You're probably best looking at going out to a DPA location and having that, being happy to be settled there. And if something else comes up, then great, you can grab it.
I think I have read through all of the questions.
Is there anybody that we've missed?
Any other questions that anyone has that they just want to their hand up for? Yes, so you do need to wait for your AHPRA application to be approved before you can submit any visa application. So when Ria talked about having a recognised medical qualifications and stuff for AHPRA, for your visa application, basically the practice will put in their nomination and they will list what you need to have. So it'll be like primary medical degree, MRCGP, CCT, and AHPRA registration. And immigration know that for a doctor to be eligible to work in Australia, they must hold AHPRA approval and have their registration complete. So you can't do anything, you can't submit a visa application without having your AHPRA approved in the first instance.
And Dr. Carr, the expedited pathway haven't changed the rules, so there is a direct entry for PR. Unfortunately, it still would be the 482 initially.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more thing? I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
I'm asking
No, go for
specific
it. That's
questions
what it's for.
Thanks, Crystal. It'd be great if you could send that stuff about the 186 because I still don't quite get it. But is the 186 visa PR or is it a stepping stone to PR?
It's P. Yeah, it is PR. Yeah,
it is PR.
It is.
Got it.
There's just two different pathways to for the 186. There's the direct entry route that's not applicable for GPs, because of the working arrangements, and then there's the transition stream that is available that allows you to transition from that 482 to the 186. So it would be that transition stream after 2 years that you would be able to access.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So it would be over 45. You do have to work for that employer for 2 years before you could apply for the 186.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks.
Perfect. One more question from Mohammed. If I move to an area with my family and that area is no longer considered as DPA before 10 years, do I still need to move? No. So they have a really great implemented grandfathering scheme with DPA locations. And basically, if you sign a contract, one of the first things we do is we go onto the DPA website, we type in that practice address, and we take a screenshot that shows that that location has DPA status. So if at any point throughout that registration process, after you've signed your contract or after you've started work, that practice or that location loses their DPA status, as long as it was in place when you signed your contract, they will honour that DPA status for your provider number. And then you can continue working there. If it loses DPA after 2 or 3 years, you are safe. You are there. You've been issued your DPA provider number. If you were to leave the area and then try and come back, that would be when it is difficult. But like I said, we take a screenshot from the website so that as long as it's DPA on the day and before you signed the day you signed your contract and after, then it's fine. And we have had instances where a doctor signed a contract, a practice has lost DPA status a couple of months later, but they've honoured it. So as long as, you won't get it taken away from you. Psychiatry, yep, December. I don't know if we've got a ton of information on what it's all going to look like for peds and psychiatry, but they are saying December, and they did say end of October for GPs, and they stuck to that timeline. So we don't expect that to exceed that timeline. Karen, our colleague who looks after those areas of medicine for recruitment to Australia, is very, very impatiently and eagerly awaiting those announcements. And so we do expect it to be relatively similar to what the GP process is.
PEDS isn't included. PEDS isn't included yet.
PEDS isn't included.
It's O&G, anaesthetics, and psychiatry.
There you go.
Thank you. I was going to say Karen's here, but I didn't know if you wanted to come out.
As long as I don't have to show my face, because I haven't made an effort.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
Has anybody else got any other questions? Well, what we'll do is we will send everybody a copy of the recording so you can go through things. And Crystal and I are happy to set up conversations on a one-to-one basis to go through things in more detail. We will send you Ria's details as well. You can obviously get in touch with her if you've got any more questions. And thank you, everybody, for your time tonight.